This is Audible.
Flip by Martyn Bedford. Read by Mark Meadows. Chapter 1. Alex couldn't have said what woke him that morning. It might have been the weird dream, or Mum calling up the stairs, or the sunlight streaming into the room. He lay in bed with that leftover adrenaline feeling of having been jolted out of a nightmare, forgotten the instant you wake up, but which vibrates in your mind like the aftershock of a slammed door. His legs were tangled in the duvet, and his right arm was trapped beneath him, useless with pins and needles. He eased onto his back. Another shout. "Come on, you're going to be late!" Late for what? It was a Saturday. He didn't have to be anywhere. She sounded odd, his mum. That familiar tone, "I'm really losing my patience now," but something else that he couldn't put his finger on. Probably she was just in one of her strops. Had Mum been cross with him when he'd come home last night? Alex couldn't recall. As it happened, he had no recollection of coming in at all, but obviously he must have done. The last thing he remembered was leaving David's at 5 to 10 and running to beat his curfew. They'd spent the evening playing chess. He won. Surfing YouTube. Listening to the Killers. The usual. He made a fist, then unclenched it. The pins and needles were gone, but his arm still felt clumsy. All his limbs and joints seemed heavy. His mouth tasted foul. If he was sickening for something on the first weekend of the Christmas holiday, that would be so typical. But he didn't feel ill. Well, Alex wasn't sure how he felt exactly. Just out of sorts. A fragment of his nightmare resurfaced. A ladder or staircase or hill, steep anyway, and he was scrambling up it as fast as he could, with some creature grabbing at his feet, and Alex trying to kick himself free. What happened next, he didn't know. That must have been when he woke up. Maybe it was all to do with his legs being twisted in the bedding. "Philip, it's 8:05. No way could it be 8:05 with all this sunshine. More like 10 or 11. Alex looked at the alarm clock on his bedside table. The clock wasn't there. Nor was the table. Instead, there was a wall, and the wall wasn't blue and silver stripes anymore. It was a plain, pale yellow. Now he thought about it, the daylight was coming in from the wrong angle. Alex sat up. The window wasn't where it should have been. Those weren't his curtains either. That wasn't his wardrobe. Those weren't his shelves. That wasn't his CD player. Those weren't his posters. Basketball? Cricket? And the carpet had been replaced by bare floorboards and a huge red and gold rug that looked like something out of Aladdin. Where was his clarinet stand, his music stand? How come his desk, which wasn't his desk and wasn't where it should be, had a flat-screen PC on it? Why was his room so big? Alex tried to figure out whose room this might be, whose house, and what on earth he was doing here. Why he was wearing another boy's t-shirt instead of his own pyjamas. Why, in December, was there a thin summer duvet on the bed? And if that woman hollering up the stairs, again, wasn't his mother, whose was she? Philip's, presumably. Philip, she had shouted. Yes, it was Philip she was cross with, not Alex. In another bedroom, Philip was failing to get up in time for something. Philip was the key to this. The rational explanation. Dad reckoned there was a rational explanation for everything, even things that made no sense at all. UFOs, ghosts, God, they're just the names people come up with for stuff they haven't worked out yet. So, the rational explanation, on his way home from David's, Alex had dropped by at Philip's place and ended up crashing there for the night. Now he'd woken up too dopey, too confused to remember doing so. Like when you go on holiday and the first morning you wake up surprised to find yourself in an unfamiliar bedroom. The part of his brain that expected him to be in his own room, his own home, was disoriented, failing to compute the messages his eyes were sending it. Any moment now, it would all come back to him. That was it. The logical, reasonable, rational explanation. Which would have been fine if he knew anyone called Philip. This was a big house. From the landing outside the bedroom in which he'd woken up, there were 3 other doors, all closed, 1 set of stairs leading down, and a narrow staircase ascending to what he supposed must be a loft conversion. He tried each of the doors in turn. 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Called up the stairs. Nothing. No people. No sign of Philip, although one of the bedrooms looked recently slept in. A girl's room, not a boy's. A gothic teenage angst thing was going on in there. He went down to the ground floor, to a high-ceilinged hallway that gave onto a sitting room with another room off that. Both empty. Radio sounds drifted up through the floor. The kitchen had to be down in the basement, which was where he'd find the woman who had been yelling up the stairs. Philip's mum. When he found her, Alex would discover the solution to the puzzle of where he was and why. Hopefully she'd fix him up with some breakfast as well. Making his way to the basement, 2 thoughts struck him. Firstly, he'd never been in this house in his life. Secondly, he definitely had something wrong with his arms and legs. His coordination. Going up and down the stairs, in and out of rooms, he'd lumbered around like a drunk. He was at it again, colliding with the door frame as he let himself into the kitchen and sending the door juddering against its stopper. "For Dr. Frankenstein's creation," a female voice said, in the style of a TV documentary narration, "even straightforward motor functions, passing through a doorway, for example, could prove problematic." Alex found himself in a large kitchen diner, oven-warmed and smelling of croissants. The voice had come from the direction of a dining table at one end of the room. It belonged to a girl who looked about 17 and whose long, straight black hair was streaked with purple. He felt self-conscious in just a t-shirt and boxers. She seemed unfazed, though, distractedly scouring the insides of a halved grapefruit with a teaspoon, sitting sideways on her chair, one black-legginged leg crossed over the other. The motif on her black t-shirt said serpent in jagged lime-green letters. Her foot tapped the air, as though in time to a tune playing in her head. Having greeted Alex with sarcasm, she now ignored him totally. Before he could think of anything to say to her, there were footsteps outside, and a woman bustled in through the open back door. Beyond her, Alex could see part of a garden, and a fat, old golden retriever snuffling around for somewhere to pee. No sign of anyone who might be Philip. "At last," the woman said, her dark eyes flaring. Then, in a flurry of hand gestures, "And you're not even dressed. Sit down and eat. The croissants will be stone cold by now, but whose fault's that?" The woman was tall and bony, wearing a filmy dress that swished when she moved. She snapped off the radio, tugged open a drawer and busied herself, ripping a bin liner from a roll and fitting it inside a stainless steel flip-top bin. Her dress was beige, patterned with irregular brown blotches, her spindly, sun-tanned limbs sticking out like oversized twiglets. If they ever crossed a giraffe with a human, Alex thought, it would look something like this. He stood there, gawping at her. "As for its mental facility, the simplest instructions, sit, eat, seemed to confound the creature." That TV voiceover again from the girl at the breakfast table. Her accent sounded vaguely northern. It was a source of consternation and dismay to Dr. Frankenstein, that his genius should have produced a being so innately stupid. "Oh, don't provoke him," the woman said. "We haven't got time for you two to start bickering." "I don't bicker," the girl said. "I scathe." "Enough, Terry." Then, gesturing him towards the other end of the room, "Will you please sit down and eat your breakfast?" If the morning had started with a 7, where 0 is totally normal and 10 is totally weird, it had skipped past 8 and was heading for 9.5. Maybe someone had drugged him. This was a hallucination, and he hadn't woken up at all, but was still at his own home, in his own bed, dreaming of croissants and giraffes and sarcastic goths. If it was a dream, though, it wasn't showing any sign of coming to an end. Unsure what else to do, Alex sat down opposite the girl. There was a wicker basket with a cloth draped over it. The croissants, he figured. Alex didn't like croissants. In the centre of the table stood several cereal boxes. He reached for the cornflakes and began tipping them into a bowl. "Mum?" The girl pointed at Alex, who'd paused mid-tip. "You asked for croissants," the woman said. "I made you croissants." He set the cereal down. It made no sense. You asked for croissants. A, he hated them. B, he hadn't asked for anything, or even spoken to her before now. You specifically asked for them. But... Now it was the girl's turn to interrupt. Glaring at him across the table, she said, "You don't even like cornflakes, turd brain." "Terry, language." Any moment now, this would stop, freaking him out. Any moment now, a TV presenter and camera crew would burst into the room and everyone would fall about laughing at the practical joke they'd played on Alex. Instead, the woman whipped away the basket, strode across the kitchen and, with a flourish, tipped the croissants into the bin. Terry gave him an "Are you satisfied now?" look. Edged with coal, her eyes were an amazing colour, almost violet. Alex glared back, trying to stare her out, but the depth of her dislike for him was so stunning, he had to look away. He topped up the cornflakes, added milk and sugar, and started eating. "Right, I'm off," Terry said, getting up from the table. The woman looked up from the dishwasher, into which she was loading some of the breakfast things. "I thought you had a free period, first thing." "I'm meeting Luce and Karina at Costa before school." "Oh, okay. Well, have fun." "Yeah, bye, Mum." With that, the girl was gone. School. He was trying to get his head round this when he became aware of a low growling. It was the golden retriever, which had come in from the garden and was standing a short distance from Alex's chair, giving him the works. The growl, the bared teeth, the raised hackles. Bloody hell, even the dog hated him. Not that Alex was that keen on dogs, either. He didn't mind them, as such, and would have quite liked one, actually, but with his asthma, that had never been an option. Talking of which, where was his inhaler? Upstairs, probably, in that bedroom. Usually he took a couple of puffs when he woke up, but this morning he hadn't, in all the confusion. His breathing was fine, though. Better than normal, despite a night spent in a house full of doggy allergens. The dog was still growling at him. "Beagle, stop that," the woman said. She sounded cross, but also surprised. The dog didn't stop. "Oh, come away, you dozy pooch. What on earth has got into you?" She took hold of his collar, dragged him across the kitchen and out through the back door. "If that's the mood you're in, you can jolly well go back outside." "What's with the name?" Alex said. "What?" The woman shut the door. "Beagle?" He smiled, trying to be friendly, to make conversation. "Only, it's a funny name for a golden retriever." She stared at him. Then, letting out a long breath, "I haven't time for this. I have to be out of the house in 10 minutes. So do you." She indicated his bowl. Finish that, get yourself upstairs. Look, and if you can possibly bring yourself to wash your face and brush your teeth, that would be so marvellous. I'm sorry, Alex said, but do you mind telling me what's going on here? The woman's expression could have frozen the face off a polar bear. I want you at the front door, dressed and ready to leave when I am, okay? Before he had a chance to reply, she left the room. He listened to the thump of her footsteps on the stairs. He sat there, bewildered, gazing at the breakfast clutter and at the unfamiliar room, its rich red walls, bathed in sunlight that slanted in through the semi-basement windows. He had half a mind to sweep everything from the table in a fit of temper. Outside, the dog was barking to be let back in. Alex spotted a newspaper, its section spread beside a plate sprinkled with toast crumbs. The Guardian. He pulled out the main news bit. The school thing was bugging him. There shouldn't be any school today, or for the next 2 weeks. Yet that was where the girl had said she was going after she'd met her friends. But it was Saturday, for crying out loud, the 22nd of December. School broke up yesterday. That afternoon, Dad would pick up Gran from the station and bring her home for Christmas. Unfolding the newspaper, his eyes searched for the date line at the top of the front page. He set the paper back on the table and laid a hand on each thigh, digging the fingers in the hope that they would stop shaking. They didn't. There had to be a mistake. There had to be. But when Alex picked up the paper again, the date was the same as before. Monday, the 23rd of June. The woman reappeared just then in a fury of bony limbs and swishing dress. There you are! Then, oh, I don't believe it! You haven't moved! Alex looked at her, afraid to blink in case the tears brimming in his eyes spilled down his face. For God's sake, she said, get a grip, Philip. Chapter 2. It was shocking enough to wake up in a strange house, to discover that he'd aged 6 months overnight, to have a woman he'd never met before mistake him for her son. But all that was a breeze compared to seeing himself in the bathroom mirror. She had more or less hauled him up the stairs by the scruff of his neck, each of his protestations seeming only to spur her on to greater levels of wrath. I'm not Philip. I don't even know who Philip is. What's going on? You're not my mother. Who are you? Where am I? Let go of me. My name's Alex Gray. I want to call my mum and dad. I'm not Philip. Then, bundled into the bathroom with the door slammed shut and Giraffe Woman keeping guard on the other side, Alex caught sight of his reflection. Or rather, he caught sight of someone else's reflection. A boy about his age. A boy without freckles, or gingery blonde hair, or blonde eyebrows so faint you could hardly see them. A boy without a small mole to one side of his Adam's apple, without blue eyes or a chipped front tooth. A boy without a dimple in his chin. The face gazing back at Alex from the mirror was brown-eyed and tanned, with the stubbly beginnings of a moustache, and dark hair cropped in the stylishly unkempt way that he could never get his own hair to go. The only blemish was a slight kink in his nose where he assumed it had once been broken. Alex ran a fingertip down the bridge of his own nose. The boy in the mirror did the same. Sure enough, Alex could feel the unevenness of the bone beneath his skin. He stooped over the toilet and retched, splashing the bowl with undigested milk and cornflakes. From the landing, "Philip, come on!" Philip. He looked at his hands, properly. They were too big. His arms as well. He had muscles. Black hairs on his forearms instead of pale ginger. The fingers were thicker, the nails slightly ridged. The pattern of veins on the backs of his hands was wrong. They weren't his hands. Yet, when he filled the basin and immersed those alien hands, his brain registered the sensation of warm water. When he bent over to wash the face, which wasn't his face, he felt the water splash against skin that wasn't his skin. He straightened up again, blinking, watching the droplets trickle down Mirror Boy's face and onto his t-shirt, which was becoming damp, just as Alex's was. It wasn't possible. It absolutely could not be possible. But there it was, literally staring him in the face. This boy was Philip. He was Philip, and if this was Philip, if this was what Alex looked like now, no wonder the woman, Philip's mother, had flipped her lid at him for claiming he was someone else. No wonder she told him he was behaving like a 7-year-old. "I'm not Philip. You're not my mother." No wonder she didn't believe him. What chance of her believing him now if he emerged from the bathroom and told her he was trapped inside her son? He wasn't sure he believed it himself, kept hoping that the next time he stole a peek at his reflection, Philip's features would be gone, replaced by his own. But each time, Philip was still there. Alex dried himself, clumsily, shaking so much he dropped the towel. His legs were hairier, and more muscular too, he noticed. When he went to pee, he had the next shock. 2 shocks at once. A, pubes. B, size. No way. It'd be like holding another boy's thing for him while he peed. He did it sitting down, like a girl, hurriedly brushed his teeth and left the bathroom as quickly as he could, so that he didn't have to look at himself in the mirror any longer. But the image wasn't so easily erased from his mind, nor could he get rid of the thought that if he had, somehow, impossibly, incomprehensibly, woken up inside another boy's body with another boy's face, then what had happened to his own? And what had happened to Philip? In Alex's house right now was this other boy, Philip, staring into a mirror just as he had been, in numbed disbelief at the face staring back at him. Was a woman who wasn't his mum chivying him off to school. Outside in the street, in Philip's school uniform, black blazer, not green, plain grey tie, not green and grey diagonal stripes, Alex watched Philip's mother set off in her bright blue punto for wherever it was she worked. No lift, then. She'd done her bit, hurrying him out of the house. The rest was down to him. No problem there, apart from the fact that he had no idea which school to go to, or where it was. Not that it mattered. Alex had no intention of going to school that morning. He fished Philip's mobile from the blazer pocket. He'd spotted the phone on a shelf in the bedroom, along with a handful of change and an expensive-looking watch. 8:25. If it was a Monday, Dad would have already left for work, and Mum would be dropping Sam at breakfast club before heading to work herself. Alex sat on the wall at the front of the house and switched on the phone. It was a slimmer, flashier model than his, but simple enough to figure out. The trouble was, he didn't know his parents' mobile numbers by heart. They were logged in his own phone's contacts. Same with Mum's work number. Dad's he'd never been given. Phoning Dad at work was strictly off-limits. Alex knew the home number, naturally, but no one would be there to answer, and any message wasn't going to be picked up until the evening. So he dialed directory inquiries and got the number for the college where his mum worked, called that number and asked to be put through to the library. She didn't start till 9, but Alex could at least be sure of getting a message to her soonest this way. Hearing her voice on the tape caught him unawares, and he was too choked up to speak at first. Then, "Mum, hi, it's Alex. I don't know what's happening or where I am or anything, but I'm here. I'm okay. Can you call me back? Can you come and fetch me?" He lost it again for a moment. Once he'd composed himself, he explained that he was using someone else's mobile and read out the number which he'd found under me in Philip's contacts. "Mum, I don't understand any of this. I'm scared. I want to come home." Alex wiped his face, took several deep breaths. Now what? He looked at the watch again. If she checked the machine as soon as she got there, he had about half an hour to wait for her to return the call. He felt conspicuous sitting outside in the street, but going back indoors wasn't an option. He didn't have a key to the house. He searched the blazer pockets. Nothing. Just a tissue, a Snickers wrapper, and a blue biro with its cap missing. At that moment, the mobile buzzed, and Alex almost dropped it in surprise. A text message, not a call, but even so, he clicked view in the hope that it was from his mother. It wasn't. The name that came up in the display was Donna. "Hey, sexy, where you at? You skiving off?" Smiley face. He closed the message. So, Philip had a girlfriend. Good for him. In a moment of inspiration, it occurred to Alex to call his own mobile number. If some kind of body swap had taken place, then maybe Philip had got hold of Alex's phone. Worth a shot, anyway. But when Alex dialed, a voice message said that the number wasn't recognized. He tried again. Same result. How could that be? He stared at the phone for a moment, then slipped it into his pocket. Right. Just standing there was pointless. Shouldering Philip's school bag, Alex set off down the street, not at all sure where he was headed, but needing to be headed somewhere. If Mum was going to collect him, he had to work out where he was. Philip's family lived in a terrace of old-looking 4-story houses, built of stone, not brick. Leafy front gardens, posh cars parked outside. At the T-junction at the bottom of the street, he randomly took a left onto a busier road. The view opened out and he saw that beyond the rooftops lay countryside. Fields, hills, trees, sheep. Not London, then, unless it was out on the edges. Did he have enough money to make it home by himself, if it came to that? He rummaged in his pocket for Philip's change. It'd pay for a bus ride or tube fare, just about. There was a Tesco across the road, and, beyond, a railway line. Cars cruised by, but he hadn't spotted a pedestrian yet. No one to ask, "Excuse me, can you tell me where I am, please?" Actually, it was nice here, wherever here was. The buildings, with the sunlight on the stone. In the distance, the tops of the hills, purple and green beneath a clear sky. He was too warm in Philip's blazer. It pulled him up short again with the reminder that it was summer now, June, not the damp grey winter he'd left behind less than 11 hours ago. Half a year gone in the space of a night's sleep. Alex wished he had been able to call his father. His rational explanation for this would have been interesting. Thinking about Dad, he came close to tears again. If it was June here, it had to be June back home as well, which meant, didn't it, that he'd been missing for 6 months? Or in a time warp. For all he knew, his parents not only had no idea where he was, but had been grieving for him since December. Their lost son. Or was Philip their son now? Alex thought he might break down right there in the street. But he didn't. He held it together. Just. He'd been doing okay since he left the house. By concentrating on the practicalities of sorting this out, trying to ignore how he looked and the fact that it felt so wrong to walk around in this unfamiliar body, he'd managed to distract himself from whatever had happened. Managed to be Alex again, if only briefly. His thoughts were the same as always. Alex's thoughts. The body might have been Philip's, but the mind was still his. On the inside, he didn't feel any different at all, except for the knowledge that something freakish and terrible had occurred. No matter how hard he tried to suppress that thought, it was there, nagging away at him. After a few minutes, he came to a parade of shops. Then a car park and more shops, a post office, an Indian restaurant, a train station with bays out front for buses. The sign outside the station said, Lichbury. Alex hadn't heard of the place. He went over to the timetables board, where there was a map of the local rail network. A few people were about, going in and out of the station, or M&S Simply Food, or waiting for buses. Among these strangers, in this strange town, he was conscious of being an outsider, of acting suspiciously somehow, as though he was a spy in their midst. Not that anyone paid him much attention. To them, he was probably just a schoolboy, bunking off. He studied the map. Lichbury was at the end of a line that ran into... He traced the route with Philip's finger. Leeds. Leeds? Where was that? Somewhere up north. A long way from South London, anyway. His spirits dipped. He could have ended up anywhere, really, he supposed. Tokyo, Mumbai, Buenos Aires. Lichbury wasn't too bad when you considered it like that. Even so, it was the thought of being this far from Mum, Dad, and Sam, from where he belonged, that was unbearable. The thought of how long it would take his mum to reach him. And when she did... He tried not to think about how he would convince her it really was him inside this body, behind this face, or even if she believed him, what she would be able to do to rescue him, to reverse this. How could she? How could anyone help him? Never mind hours, he might be stuck like this for days, weeks, months, years. Forever. The phone buzzed again. Fumbling it from the blazer, he opened the message. Smoothies after school? See you there. B. Kiss. This one was from Billy. 2 girlfriends. To pass the time until Mum returned his call, he parked himself on a bench outside the station and went through Philip's school bag. In the rush to leave the house, the bag had been shoved into his hands by the giraffe woman as she bundled him out of the door. What was in there? Keys to the house, maybe. Money. Packed lunch. Having brought up his breakfast, Alex was hungry. Some clues, perhaps, to who Philip was. Of all the billions of people in the world, Alex had wound up with him. He couldn't help thinking it wasn't just down to chance, that there had to be a reason, some connection that had paired them together like this. Alex opened the various compartments and set the contents down beside him on the bench. The results were disappointing. A cagoule rolled up tight. School books, maths, history, French. A school planner. A Snickers wrapper. Pens, pencils, ruler, eraser, sharpener. A calculator. An iPod. A fixture list for Yorkshire County Cricket Club. A lighter. A pack of playing cards. A 1 gigabyte memory stick. Deodorant, Lynx. Hair gel. Breath freshener spray. A 2p coin. A dried out apple core. A half-finished tube of polos. A young person's travel pass. 4 elastic bands. 2 paper clips. A mobile phone top-up card. Another Snickers wrapper. And finally, a small key for his locker on a keyring in the shape of a pair of breasts. Alex popped a mint, binned the apple core and wrappers, and methodically put everything else back in the bag, except for the planner, the iPod, and the playing cards. There was something odd about the box. It was too light to contain a deck of cards. He flipped the lid. Cigarettes. Well, that explained the foul taste in his mouth when he woke up. It also explained the lighter, the polos, and the breath freshener. He had never smoked apart from half a cigarette at a party just to give it a try. But even if he'd liked it, which he hadn't, smoking wasn't a good idea for an asthmatic. It occurred to Alex that he didn't have asthma now. He inhaled, deeply, no hint of a wheeze, and let the air back out in one long blow. These were definitely Philip's bronchial tubes. Philip's lungs. Maybe this was how transplant patients felt, with someone else's lungs or heart or liver inside them. Only in Alex's case, it was an entire body transplant. Skin, flesh, muscle, ligaments, bones, blood, internal organs. The lot. All he had left of himself, as far as he could tell, was his brain. Or not even the actual brain, but the thoughts inside it. The mind, or consciousness. Whatever it was that made Alex, Alex. No, it was way too weird even to think about. He turned his attention to the planner. A5, spiral bound, with a clear plastic cover, and beneath that the school crest, motto, Cognitio Vincit Omnia, and name, Lichbury High School. Philip's surname was Garamond. What kind of name was that? And he was in tutor group 9B. OK, so they were in the same school year. Tenuous, as connections go, but age was something else they had in common, along with gender and country of residence. A train had arrived. Passengers were streaming out of the station. He glanced up, distracted by the blur of passing feet. He checked his watch again. Come on, Mum. Call. Please call. She would call. She would believe him. She would drive straight up here and take him home, away from all this. She would get help, somehow, and it would be all right. He would be himself again. Garamond! There was a baker's across the road. Alex thought about getting a sausage roll or something with Philip's change, but didn't want to use up what little money he had. Garamond! Alex bent over the planner once more, ready to have a proper nosy inside. A shadow fell across the page. Philip Garamond, I'm talking to you. Alex looked up. The guy was bald and wearing a checked jacket buttoned tight across his belly and a red and white bow tie. He carried a leather briefcase, too fat with books and papers to shut properly. It's 10 to 9, boy, he said. Why aren't you in school? Chapter 3. Right, let's see what Miss Sprake has to say, shall we? Alex was made to stand in the corridor, while the teacher with the bow tie and bulging briefcase went into one of the classrooms. He'd been marched from the station to the school, his escort panting alongside him, too out of condition to walk and talk at the same time. If Alex had made a break for it, there was no way bow tie could have caught him. But it wasn't in his nature to disobey a teacher quite so blatantly, even if that teacher had mistaken him for someone else. Besides, Alex had nowhere to run to. Bow tie reappeared with a woman Alex assumed to be Philip's form tutor. She pulled the door, too, shutting off a hubbub of classroom chatter. EN2, the panel on the door said. English. He wondered what they called Miss Sprake behind her back. Spray can, or something like that. Quite young, but frumpy, in her pale blue blouse and a navy corduroy skirt that came to her knees. She removed her glasses and held them carefully by the stems. His friend David was the same with his, paranoid about smudging the lenses, obsessively cleaning them with a special cloth. A long way from here, David would be in history at this moment, an empty seat beside him. What's this about, Philip? The woman said, a crease forming between her eyebrows. If she meant to sound stern, it came out more like concern. Perhaps she liked Philip. That was a first this morning. I don't know, miss. Mr. Johansson says you were at the station. I wasn't going anywhere. He shrugged. Just sitting there, thinking. A snort from Mr. Johansson. That would make a change, Garamond. So it continued, the two teachers doing the good cop, bad cop routine, Alex failing to come up with a satisfactory explanation for his truancy. For sure, he wasn't about to tell them the truth. Oh, what it was, I woke up in another boy's body and... Eventually, Miss Sprake decided that, whatever the reason, he had been caught off-site during school hours without permission. Sanction, a comment in his planner, and he was to see her after last period so they could discuss this properly. "Just be thankful Mr. Johansson came by when he did," she said. "An entire day on the sky, then I'd be sending a letter to your parents and red-slipping you." Red-slipping? That must mean isolation here. At Crocombe Hill High, it was called being cabined, after the porter cabin where you served your sentence. Alex had never been cabined or received a comment in his planner, although he was getting one now. At least, Philip was. "What's your first lesson?" Miss Sprake asked. Alex plucked a subject out of the air. "History." "I hardly think so," cut in Mr. Johansson, "seeing as I'm your history teacher." Damn, what were the odds? "Sorry, I meant... Actually, which week is it?" "Blimey, Philip, you've been on this timetable for 9 months. This was Miss Sprake. If that frown cut any deeper, her eyebrows would shear off. She flipped to another page in his planner. "Blue week, Monday, first period, German." German? He didn't do German. "Oh, right, yeah, that's it, German." "Right, get yourself off there, and no stopping at the lockers. You've missed 20 minutes as it is." As she handed back the planner, Philip's mobile rang. "Mum." He pulled the phone from his blazer pocket, the ringtone, some rap thing, startlingly loud. Before he could answer, Mr. Johansson snatched the mobile from him. "I don't think so, do you?" With that, and some fumbling for the right button, Bow Tie Man switched off the phone. The ringtone stopped. "That call was important!" Alex's raised voice ricocheted along the corridor. It was hard to tell which of the three of them was the most shocked. After a pause, Miss Sprake said, "Philip, you're in quite enough bother as it is." "Sorry, but I need to take that call, I really do." "What you need to do, in fact, is take yourself off to German. Now." "But..." "Now this minute."